morning all. Welcome to this webinar on which way for livestock finishing and fattening in Kenya. My name is Abdi Wario, Head of Program at Kenya Market Trust. We're going to have a very interesting conversation around livestock, in particular fattening and finishing in Kenya. At this point, allow me to welcome Chris Shimba to say a word of prayer for us.
Let's pray. Our Father and our God in heaven, we thank you and we give glory unto your name. We worship and honor you because of the privilege and the opportunity that you've given us to be able to discuss how best we can be able to transform the livestock sector in Kenya and even make it better. We also want to thank you for the opportunity and the privilege that you've gathered us all together for this important discussion. Our prayer is that as we start our meeting this morning, may you be with us. Bless each and every one of us, take us through this experience, and Father, when we finish, may we have the action points that will also be able to take us to another level. Now, as we start, take charge and take care of us all until we finish. It's our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Chris, for the prayers. Allow me to invite Alison Otieno-Ng'en, the CEO of Kenya Market Trust, to introduce the webinar.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for making time to join us for this webinar. We're indeed excited about the overwhelming response that this event has received, which I believe speaks to the relevance and timeliness of the day's topic. For those who may not be familiar with our work, Kenya Markets Trust is a local not-for-profit organization that works to transform key markets in Kenya in a bid to make them more competitive, sustainable, and inclusive for the benefit of all players. We currently focus on agricultural inputs, water, and livestock sectors in Kenya. I invite you to visit our website for more information on our work. But today, we're here to speak about the livestock sector, and specifically finishing and fattening as a means of increasing quantity and quality of Kenya's livestock. Kenya's livestock sector plays a significant role in supporting the livelihoods of more than 10 million pastoralists, while contributing about 10% to Kenya's GDP. Sadly, despite having the second largest herd of livestock in Africa, we remain a meat deficit country to the tune of 300 metric tons annually, needing us to supplement our local meat demand from our neighboring countries. This demand is set to continue increasing, with our population projected to double by 2050, coupled with increasing urbanization and overall improving economic status. Our current production systems, which primarily rely on pastoralism, is mainly subsistence-based, producing cattle with slower growing rates, poor carcass characterization, and poor meat quality. Encouraging a shift to a commercial-oriented production system would allow farmers to produce more and better quality meat throughout the year, thus evening out our supply and optimizing on value generated. This would also catalyze the overall development of the beef industry across the country. Our organization's livestock sector strategy seeks to influence the modernization of Kenya's livestock sector through the adoption of productivity-enhancing technologies, value addition, food safety, and product differentiation. We recognize that livestock finishing and fattening has huge potential to be a catalyst for the Kenyan livestock sector. This can be achieved by linking pastoralists to the formal value chain and enabling value addition, quality, and safety. This will allow Kenya to meet the growing domestic demand and potentially even respond to the untapped export market. With this in mind, we commissioned this study to analyze the various finishing and fattening enterprises, business models, and their economic viability across major livestock trade routes. It involved a review of other finishing and fattening models in the region and the current market opportunities for meat that has gone through different finishing and fattening regimes. Findings from this study indicate that although a significant proportion of the finishing and fattening enterprises face a myriad of constraints, there is huge potential that can be harnessed to ensure profitability and sustainability of the sector, while effectively meeting consumer demand and consequently promoting competitiveness of the livestock sector. This webinar seeks to disseminate the findings from this study, the content of which we believe is not only valuable for informing our internal work, but that of the entire industry. We invite you to engage and actively contribute to the discussions on how best we can enhance production practices and create an enabling environment for effective livestock production. My sincere appreciation once again for making time to join us, and I welcome you to contribute actively in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alison. Indeed, you have highlighted some very useful statistics there that Kenya, having the second largest livestock, we are still lagging behind in terms of beef deficit, something that we need to ask ourselves, how do we address this particular concern? And at this point, allow me to invite Dr. Christopher Wanga to officially open this particular session. Over to you, Dr. Christopher Wanga.
Thank you, Wario, the CEO of Kenya Markets Trust, Alison Otieno, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed very, very excited to join this webinar on behalf of the State Department for Livestock. Receive compliments from the Principal Secretary of the Department of Livestock. And I wish to state from the outset, the livestock sector plays a very, very critical role in the national economy of Kenya, with a direct contribution of about 12%, the national gross domestic product. The livestock sector supplies the domestic requirements of meat, milk, dairy products, eggs, and other livestock products, while accounting for over 30% of the total marketed agricultural products. Livestock is a significant part of the global economy, contributing to economic growth, poverty reduction, and nutrition. To enhance meat supply, livestock finishing and fattening. This is particularly of cattle, because remember, we can also finish sheep and goats. It's critical in closing the meat supply gap. Therefore, this webinar is opportune as we focus on developing the meat industry within the livestock sector. Ladies and gentlemen, the potential contribution of livestock to the Kenyan economy may be larger than currently estimated in official statistics, but can be more accurately estimated by proper analysis of credible data that inform evidence-based investment strategies and action plans. This aspiration is also supported by various other continental, regional, national, policy and strategy pronouncements, such as the Malabo Declaration on Accelerated Agricultural Growth and Transformation for Shared Prosperity and Improved Livelihoods, the Livestock Development Strategy for Africa, the IGAD Livestock Policy Initiative, the COMESA Regional Livestock Policy Framework, the East Africa Community Livestock Policy, Eastern Africa Livestock Strategy, the Livestock Policy for Kenya, and the Veterinary Policy. Currently, ladies and gentlemen, the sector has a wide range of policies and strategies that need to be operationalized through clear roadmaps that define incentives, roles, and responsibilities of various market actors. The arid and semi-arid areas, which are the key livestock producing areas in the country, have perennially received government and development partners' investments, including relief. However, the sector has registered limited growth and little evidence of robustness that is commensurate with the investments. This can be largely attributed to less targeted investments as a result of an availability of relevant data and evidence. To realize the aspirations of a middle-income country, there is need for structural transformation of this sector to make it a major purveyor of food security, poverty reduction, economic growth, and creation of employment. Delivery of this sector transformation requires a clear roadmap that provides the national and county governments, development partners, and the private sector with a wide range of choices of evidence-based justified investment opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, a livestock master plan that contains accurate data and information on livestock, resources, and the available investment options based on competitive advantages is very essential for this sector. The livestock master plan that is forward-looking, focusing on regularly updating data, investment plans, and the short and long-term and mitigation measures for the calamities frequently experienced in the sector. The sector-generated data requires to be digitalized and packaged into usable information at all levels of government, private sector, and farming communities. Therefore, the livestock master plan is more important than ever for these reasons to enable us to have planned, effective, and efficient contribution of livestock to the Big Four agenda, especially the pillars of food security, safety of food, and the manufacturing. The livestock master plan that I'm happy to report to you is being done jointly by the ministry partners, especially the Kenya Markets Trust, who are leader in supporting this initiative, will guide the development of a sustainable livestock sector and attract more and better targeted investments from every other investor within the livestock sector. Ladies and gentlemen, the focus of this livestock master plan will inform government, livestock experts, planners, livestock value chain actors, and other partners on realistic investment planning based on the current constitutional dispensation of devolution, as we anchor it on the Kenya Vision 2030, the national policies, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In the entire livestock sector, we are focused on providing an enabling environment to all actors through the published livestock bill, which is currently in Parliament, the veterinary bills that we are reviewing currently. Remember, we are reviewing the animal health bill, the veterinary public health bill, the animal welfare and protection bill, just to ensure that we have an enabling environment for all actors to operate. Further, specific strategies focusing on value chains or industries are also being developed. And for our interest today, we have the beef strategy that has commenced development. We also have the dairy industry strategy, the livestock identification and traceability strategy, among others. In this regard, members, participants, I wish to thank all of you for finding time. And at this juncture, I now declare the webinar on livestock finishing and fattening officially opened, and I want to wish you all very, very fruitful deliberations. And please share with us the resolutions, which I believe will be very, very critical as we focus on improving the meat industry in Kenya. Thank you very much, and God bless all of us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wanga, for that official opening. And you have clearly indicated that livestock contributes about 12% to our GDP, and you've clearly indicated that these figures are underestimated. And from that figure, we can clearly see that livestock contribute more than what was anticipated contribution from even SGR. And hence the reason why we need to give sufficient attention and dedication to livestock sector. Indeed, if we are able to harness this particular sector, we can move this contribution of GDP to 20%. And therefore, hence, the reason why it's more important for us to discuss how we are able to leverage livestock sector and hence this particular conversation. At this point, allow me to invite Dr. Boniface Kaberia, who is KMT's livestock sector manager, to present the findings of this research to us. Karibu, Daktari.
Thank you, Wario. My name's Dr. Boniface Kaberia, as you've been told. I'm the livestock sector manager with Kenya Markets Trust. The study I'm going to present was conducted in 2019, and we kept hoping that we would share the findings last year, but because of the COVID situation, we couldn't. However, here we are now. And let me give you the background. Yeah, Kenya, as my CEO said, has one of the largest reserves of livestock in Africa. We're not having the opportunity of exporting. We still have a big challenge. Let us look at the demand side of the livestock sector. Currently, our population stands at about 47 million. It is estimated that by 2050, we will be 96 million. And that means there will be demand for more livestock products. And besides the demand for the livestock products as a result of the population, there will also be demand for feeding this population. On the supply side, we have 86% of the meat market is very informal. And then only about 2% of that meat sold undergoes cold chain processing. And the big challenge that we face is that about 50% of our livestock, we lose about 50% of our livestock from birth to the time they go to the market. And we have about US $250 million value per year would be extracted by simply processing the fifth quarter, which is the offals, among other things. And that's untapped opportunity in the supply chain. I see also mentioned that we have a deficit of about 300,000 metric tons as of 2016 of beef in this country, and we get a supply of that from our neighboring countries, Somalia through Garissa market, Tanzania, the northern part of Tanzania, and even Uganda. So basically, though we have the largest herd, we're still a deficit country. But I also want to mention that our country, 80% of our land mass is ASO, which is high potential for production. So again, an opportunity that is not exploited. This graph is drawn from FAO data, and it projects that our economy will continue to grow to 2050. Urbanization, the devolution that set in also has set in urbanization, which has been growing. And our population, as I said earlier, has been growing. These three factors will continue. And therefore, when we talk about demand side, that is what it means. Now, the supply projections. If you look at that FAO data, it predicts that we will need to grow our beef production by 173% by 2050 to actually feed the population. And you can see all the other milk, 175, poultry, 174, eggs, 503%, and the pork, 268. What does it mean to our country that's already a meat deficit country? it is not just the population that are growing, but what is happening in this country is that the growth is of affluent people who are urbanized, educated, and who are earning good money, and which therefore means there is increased demand for more safe and better quality animal source foods. We are seeing a lot of interest, and we did a study last 2019 again on meat consumption trends, and it's very clear that there's a lot of interest in safety of meat. However, our current production systems have low carcass yields and lower quality meat sold after optimal age. What would we need to do, therefore, to feed the nation and meet this growing demand? Two-pronged approach. One is increasing the population of livestock. However, we are all aware that you can't grow the piece of land that we have, and therefore we need to also increase yields per animal. And as compared to where we're selling an animal that is 10 years old, we should be able to produce a 3-year-old, three of those animals in 10 years, so that we also, and with better yields. The fattening and finishing study, the objectives were to explore different models of finishing and fattening enterprises in Kenya, to interrogate the operations of finishing and fattening enterprises from entry to the end markets, and to conduct a market economic and financial analysis of the various models and try to see which ones would be best in terms of meeting this supply gap that we're talking of. How did we conduct the study? We did a preliminary literature review, and the purpose was to map out counties that are predominantly livestock. And these were like Laikipia, Nyeri, Kajiado, Garissa. And this also literature review guided sampling of the study sites and the key informants. Sampling of respondents was purposive sampling from different agroecological zones identified from the preliminary review. And the primary data used in this study is data from finishing and fattening enterprise records. And then there was the key informants interviews, mainly from finishing and fattening operations and expert interviews. And we also conducted focus group discussions with the producers. Data analysis was done using business model Canvas. That table simply tells you that our category of respondents were drawn from branches, intensive finishing and fattening enterprises, support industries, producers, traders, processors, government, and other actors. And I'll not belabor that. And then you can see the locations where they were drawn. Allow me to define these two terms because I'll be using them a lot in the presentation of the study. Finishing refers to young livestock, usually 2 to 3 years old, are fed with high protein and high energy diets under confinement, and with two purposes: one, to increase the live weight and attain better grades, as opposed to fattening, which is where we are getting older livestock, usually over 4 years, and either they've been bought during the dry season, or they are emaciated, or somebody's just gone to the market and looked for them and take them in for fattening so that they attain a bigger, higher market live weight and improve body condition. So these two terms, I'll be using them in that reference. The study findings. We tried to map out the supply of animals for the fattening and finishing enterprises. And in both cases, animals come from the pastoral communities and ranches. And these animals go either direct to fattening enterprises or to finishing. However, there is an emerging trend also that was observed of what we are calling cow-calf herd, where some producers are actually starting to think of producing annual crops, calf crops, maybe 20, 30 every year, and offloading them to the market. And we've started seeing that more in Garissa livestock market, where you find a herd of about almost same age brought into the market. We also have the livestock market, but the livestock market and traders mainly provide stock for fattening enterprises. And both of these finishing enterprises and fattening enterprises supply the terminal markets, besides also the pastoralists having direct contact with the terminal markets and the ranchers. There was no clear-cut delineation between finishing and fattening models as I defined them. However, the models can be broadly categorized into intensive, semi-intensive, and extensive. In intensive, animals are confined and trap-fed with less movement. For semi-intensive, there is a combination of grazing and being fed supplementation. And extensive is basically grazing the animals. Classification of our respondents for the study, you will see about 50% or 55 thereon of our respondents were drawn from extensive, that is the community groups, the community ranches. We had only one intensive finishing enterprise involved in this. The rest, you can see the distribution of the respondents. The study tried to characterize the intensive fattening finishing models and found out that it aims to produce 36 months old with optimal market weight. Main breeds kept include improved Boran, Aberdeen, Angus, and the feed is mostly prepared on farm. And most of them were often vertically integrated operations. That is, they have either the slaughter facilities, and where they don't have, they have outsourced them. Storage and aging facilities are also available to these intensive finishing models. Their market distribution channels are high-end hotels, restaurants, and meat eateries based in Naivasha, Nanyuki, and Nairobi. What we've found out is that they have high level of investments required and high working capital required. Now, this high working capital actually contributes to the reason why many people have gone into intensive finishing models and abandoned them, because of the high working capital. Semi-intensive finishing models, mainly practiced in commercial ranches in Laikipia, and aims to fasten weight gain. Animals are selected at 24 to 30 months of age, combines grazing and feeding improved or is reserve fodder, which is kept closer to pastures. Water is provided on location to ensure minimal movement. And predominantly beef cattle of improved Boran, Cemento, and Wagyu are used in these semi-intensive finishing models. Extensive finishing models are selected after weaning, about 12 months, fed purely on grass until they attain target slaughter weight. Supplementation done using rich fodder, and the young finished animals tend to fetch higher premium meat price compared to the older fattened animals. Unique selling point for these enterprises is the meat being said to be organic or being organic. It's sold and they sell their meat in high-end hotels and butcheries. And this is viable for producers with large tracts of standing hay. Let us look at the performance characteristics of these finishing models: intensive, semi-intensive, and extensive. The total herd, that line that you see on that table there, we aggregated all the the enterprises that were visited, and the total of animals that were found in those respondents' enterprises. With intensive, we had about 3,000 cattle and 480 shots, semi-intensive, 1,200 cattle and 60, and extensive, about 400. Of importance in this table is you see, as much as we are talking of extensive, semi-intensive, the numbers also here matter. However, with a total of herd of 3,000 in intensive, only about 1,000 of those attain one time undergoing finishing. Similarly, in semi-intensive, 280, and extensive, 100. So you can see the proportion of the herds in various enterprises that is involved in finishing or being prepared for the market. The average cost of finishers at entry in both the semi-intensive and intensive is about 45,000, whereas the extensive is about 36. The length of the finishing cycle, and look at it there, you will see semi-intensive, extensive are almost the same period, 6 to 8 months, as opposed to extensive where they stay, the animals will stay 15 to 20 months. Feed cost per day per animal, you will see intensive, and I'm sure somebody will ask, why is it costing more in intensive as opposed to semi-intensive, which is 300, and extensive 50 shillings. In the intensive, 150 shillings, it's because of economies of scale. You can see the number of skiers up there being involved as opposed to 280. So the cost of feeding them and transporting of the feed and all that becomes higher. The average daily weight gain in intensive, it's about 1.5 kilograms average. Semi-intensive, 0.7 to 1 kg, and extensive, you can see there. The target slaughter weight in intensive is about 500 to 600, semi-intensive 450, and similarly to extensive. I would like to look at the average retail meat prices per kilogram. You get more from the intensively produced animals, and slightly more, less with the semi-intensive, and with extensive, it ranges 450 to 500, which is what we see in our current market. Characteristic of intensive fattening models. Most common emerging finishing and fattening enterprise across all agroecological zones, and it's a new practice that we are seeing, and mostly in Garissa, Kitui, Laikipia, Nyeri, and Taita Taveta counties, where people are going to the markets looking for animals and putting them in to fatten them. Animals are purchased and fattened in large paddocks. Animals confined and trafficked good quality hay, high energy and protein concentrate, and uses bought in complete feeds or farm-grown prepared feeds. The fatteners were mostly indigenous Boran, and mainly bulls and a few older cows, and majority, 80% of them being over 4 years. Performance characteristic of intensive farming models. We looked at different intensive farming fattening models in Garissa, Kitui, Laikipia, Kajiado, Nyeri, and Taita Taveta. And of interest there is you will see the average cost of fattener at entry. At Garissa, it's about 25 to 30,000, Kitui, so you can see those numbers there. The length of fattening cycle, and this may have some implication in terms of type of grasses the animals have been grazing on. In Garissa, it takes about 90 days for the fattening. Kitui, 75 to 90 days. Laikipia, 180. Kajiado, 90, and you can see that. Feed cost per day per animal. Garissa and Kitui seem to have the highest feed cost per animal. And the lowest we see is in Laikipia and Nyeri. And probably this is because also we have people who have invested in feed production industries in some of the counties like Laikipia. and the element of transport of costs that would affect the animal feed costs in the other counties. And also availability, because sometimes when you have the supply of those animal feeds in Garissa in low volumes, then the prices must go up. Average daily weight gain in Garissa, 1 to 1.5 kg, Kitui, 1.5 to 2. Similarly with Kajiado, Laikipia, 0.5 kilograms, and the live weight there. Characteristics of semi-intensive fattening models, common in coastal region and some Laikipia ranches. And this is because there is ample land that makes grazing attractive and viable. It aims to improve the slaughter weight and meat quality, and uses a combination of graze and supplementation with concentrate feeds for about 120 days. The animals travel to a central place for water where supplementation is also done, and uses harvested grass or supplementary concentrates to finish. Characteristics of extensive fattening models: animals grazed on natural pastures and fed hay during periods of pasture scarcity only, and common in commercial and group ranches in Laikipia. We were able to identify 3 different types of extensive fattening models, and I'll quickly just give an overview of them. One is fattening on pastures in commercial ranches, where animals are mostly sold through traders to former meat wholesalers like choice meat. The production cost is lowest due to low cost of feed. However, the productivity remains low, and therefore animals stay for longer periods before going to the market. And most ranchers prefer this model for compatibility with other operations such as community outreach, conservation, and tourism. Fattening on pastures by group ranches is just similar to fattening by commercial ranches, but is less management intense and successful. Communities feed the animals on standing pasture, no supplementation. Fattening on pastures by conservancies, mainly practiced in Laikipia. Animals are sourced from the neighboring markets, group ranches, and communities within the conservancies, and animals grazed on improved pastures, supplemented to achieve market weight. We undertook financial analysis of both finishing and fattening, and 3 key things were emerged as key drivers of profitability: the entry purchasing price, the feeds costs, and the management costs. With 60% of the cost under intensive model, that is, the purchasing price constitutes about 60% of costs under intensive model, and 50% of the cost under semi-intensive model, and about 70% of the cost under extensive model. Feeds contribute about 30 to 35% of the total outlay under the intensive and semi-intensive systems, and 15% of the value add under the extensive system. The combination of pasture and concentrates grain feeding in both intensive and semi-intensive system makes the cost of feed significantly higher compared to the extensive system, as you're going to see later. Pest and disease management costs mainly from pest and disease control, animal health services, and security, and contributes about 5 to 15% of the total value add. Costs increase as you move towards the more extensive systems. Increased exposure to pests and diseases, which makes more regular application of things like the vaccination or dipping services essential. And this is what I've just said is just summarizing these 3 graphs. You can see the animal purchase price, the animals that are about to go to either intensive, semi-intensive, or extensive, it contributes a big chunk of the different models. And mainly is the animal purchase price. If you look at the intensive, 35% on feeding, extensive 15%, semi-intensive almost the same with intensive. So when you're choosing which one to go into, this tells you a lot. The management costs are lowest in intensive model and highest in extensive model. Profitability analysis of the different models. We have profitability analysis for finishing models, extensive, semi-intensive, and intensive. And I want you to look at both graphs and look at the gross margins. If you look at profitability analysis for finishing under intensive, the gross margin is slightly around 60. The extensive comes to around 50. However, if you look at the fattening models, the gross margins of whether extensive, semi-intensive, or intensive is not more than 40. So this tells you something. With the finishing, extensive comes second and semi-intensive is the least. With the fattening, extensive comes first, semi-intensive second, and intensive least in terms of gross margins. We have been doing technical support to different fattening and finishing enterprises in Laikipia and Taita Taveta as part of our trials. And we wish to share with you a sample of profitability analysis that has been done for one of them. And I'm not going to run through all the figures, but if you look at the first column is the cost per head. This cost per head, this is a 3-month cycle that we're using. So you will see what the profit would be per head. And ultimately in those 3 months, down bottom there, you're able to see that you would be making about 739,945. And this is the average weight gain there was 2. And this is about looking at how you vary the different elements of costs to ensure profitability and the investments. Financial profitability analysis. The intensive model emerges the most profitable model, higher weight gain per day, relatively lower management costs, and meat attracts premium prices in the market when compared to the other models. However, profitability is merely dependent on keeping the cost of feed at a reasonable level. Semi-intensive model emerges the least profitable of the 3 models. High cost of supplementary feeding, relative lower productivity, that is weight gain per unit of feed, higher management costs which lower the returns, and more relevant for fattening of animals rather than for finishing. Extensive model emerges as the second most profitable model with low costs of feeds on livestock, freely grazing, and grass is harvested. And this has implication again when we will talk about constraints. And then meat attracts premium in the market because of being marketed as organic. However, it is only viable for producers with large tracts of standing hay. So that again presents opportunity for producers around such enterprises producing hay. Performance drivers of finishing and fattening models. We are trying to compare there the fattening and finishing. Under fattening models, weight at the entry of fattening enterprise played a key role of all of them, whether extensive, semi-intensive, or intensive. And the period they are going to stay in that enterprise before they go to the market. Some people keep the animal for so long and they forget that the animal is actually also consuming. And the third to that category is cost of feeds per kilogram weight gain. And the least in the fattening is the cost of management. If you look at the finishing period of reach to market, that is the days they stay, seems to be very pronounced, followed by cost of management and weight at entry. The study also tried to map out supportive functions of fattening and finishing, and I'm simply just going to look at them. It's access to management, capacity, sourcing and finishing fatteners, animal health and disease control, selection of finishing and fattening, marketing and slaughter of finishing. Access to finance has been one of the biggest issue here in all the enterprises, and access to feeds. In summary, fattening and finishing is a viable enterprise that can help unlock the value in the livestock market system. There's an emerging trend among the pastoral communities towards a more commercially oriented animal production system. And however, some critical constraints to fattening and finishing were identified. And of importance in that graph there, you will see the most is the feed costs, followed by availability of finishing and fattening stock. This availability of finishing and fattening stock presents an opportunity for specialization by producers to produce annual or 2-year-old crops every year that they offload the market. And also there is market access also being a big issue. So I'm not going to look at all of them, but those are key highlights. Recommendations. We had 4 recommendations that emerged from this study. One is to address the inefficiencies within the finishing and fattening industry by improving the efficiency of the intensive finishing and fattening enterprises through proper bookkeeping and overall management. Creating linkages between primary producers and the finishing and fattening enterprises through aggregators, and improve scale and aggregation to unlock the supply chain efficiencies. And we know that the government has been having a lot of this land that is holding grounds. If there was a way of private-public partnerships to open aggregation units that provide that linkage, that would be very good. Provision of technical assistance to finishing and fattening operations, strengthening of support services for the sector, including improving access to capital, that is financing, supporting improvements in the feed inputs market, transportation and infrastructure services, and then improving efficiencies within the ranches. The second recommendation was improve integration between finishing and fattening subsector and pastoral production and markets to address the supply of quality and quantity of fatteners and finishers. And 3 interventions emerge here, that is support livestock production through better organization of producer and support services, breed improvement, and fodder and feed improvement. Is there an opportunity that we could be having people who emerge as support services for fodder and feed production and breed improvement? Third was support markets for feedlots, beef, and finally, improve policy and legislative environment. And 3 interventions emerged out of this. One is addressing conflicts, invasions, and wildlife-human conflicts that have direct impacts on the security of the finishing and the fattening operations. And this is especially in the coast and Laikipia ranches. 2, reducing costs associated with markets such as multiple taxations by the counties and informal fees charged as animals move to markets. And ultimately, the final one, intervention, is reducing import tariffs on raw materials for animal feeds inputs, while strengthening quality assurance of current input available in the market. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Daktari, for that elaborate presentation. We have seen a number of questions that you have posted, and we will address all those questions. Continue posting your question. I've also seen a number of participants who have raised up their hands. We'll give you that opportunity to pose your question. It's quite evident that there is a clear opportunity in investing in finishing and fattening. if you can make 739,000 in 3 months as a profit from this venture, in 1 year, that translates to 2.3 million Kenya shillings by just keeping 50 herds in 3 cycles, a clear business opportunity. However, we've noted that there hasn't been a good uptake of this initiative. And there are a number of issues that have come up from this research, which Dr. Boniface has alluded to. These are, for instance, cost of feed, access to finance, proper integration of pastoralists into finishing and fattening enterprises, access to high protein content feed. And therefore, we have prepared a panelist that will be able to handle these questions. Allow us to proceed to this panel, and I will introduce my panel as they answer their questions. So we have 5 of them. I will start with Mr. Stanley Muhia, who is the Deputy Director, Livestock Production, Rangeland Resource Unit in the State Department for Livestock. He has worked in pastoral livestock production systems and coordinated several programs and projects. He is currently the chairman of Feedlot Initiative at the State Department of Livestock. And therefore, anything related to feedlot, we have the right person to answer those questions. He holds MSc Agriculture and Development and a Bachelor in Range Management. Mr. Stanley, the first question that comes from this particular study, and we want you to provide some more insight. Feedlot has been positioned as a solution to addressing our beef deficit. However, the uptake is quite low. What could be the hindrance to the uptake of feedlot in this country? Over to you, Mr. Stanley.
Thank you very much, Wario. Maybe I will do a preamble before I come to your question.
Proceed, sure.
I'm saying that the government plan, especially in the midterm plan for the 3rd year, 2018-2022, we project that the agricultural sector is supposed to grow by 7%. And the livestock subsector is expected to grow and contribute significantly to the country's economic development. And this growth is achieved through measures that include livestock production and productivity, disease and pest control, crop and livestock insurance, post-harvest management, market development, natural resource management, increased sector investment, and strengthen institution policies and systems. The government investment and strengthening institution policy system through the Big Four agenda has identified the development of feedlot as a system of a key activity that contribute towards the realization of 100% food and nutrition security. Now, the rationale for starting the feedlot models in Kenya is according to the economic survey for 2019, we anticipate that the demand for beef currently standing at 700,000 metric tons, with an estimated 30% of slaughtered stock imported from the neighboring countries of Somalia, Ethiopia, and Uganda. And therefore, there is need to prepare feedlots of live animals with the correct specification, such as leanness and fat cover, to meet the market requirements. The production system also triggers enhanced livestock offtake with a higher weight gain, and therefore producing meat that are of tender quality, that is safe and of higher quality, which is preferred mainly by the high-end market, and also the international requirements for phytosanitary standards. The policies and plans of establishing feedlots as a faster way of meeting the ever-escalating meat demand, which is expected to be 900,000 metric tons by the year 2022, actually next year. The existing pastoral ranching production system has not been able to achieve that demand due to reduced offtake as a result of poor feeding regime and long distance cover to reach the markets, and also natural resources. There are existing opportunity in the feedlot system by having superior breeds which are adapted to the arsal environment. And I'm happy that during the report that we have just received, we have seen breeds that are able to gain weight at a very high rate, and therefore they are suitable for those arsal environment. We also have large tracts of government land. That is what we call the former livestock holding grounds, which were used initially for screening animals and controlling diseases before the animals are delivered to the slaughterhouses and to the tertiary markets. Additionally, we are saying that the land available can be used for pasture and fodder production. As has been mentioned in the report, we have seen that feedlotting requires a lot of high quality and high grain feeds, and therefore we can be able to use the available land for growing pasture and fodder and either rain-fed agriculture or irrigation to support the intensity feeding in the feedlots. The feedlot production system strategies actually entails a situation whereby we want to bring the private investor to operate in government land and therefore be able to put up the infrastructure, purchase the animals, and therefore we have what we call private-public partnership so that we can partner with the private sector and they are able to purchase the superior immatures from the neighboring community, and they engage the community in developing the infrastructure, and also the community can be able to provide the feeds that are required for the feedlots. The other thing we are saying that we have been able to identify 14 strategic holding grounds and investors have been identified by the State Department for undertaking the process of feedlot development. The initial target was actually to have 50 feedlots within those 14 strategic feedlot holding grounds, and with a plan of having in each unit 500 animals with a 3-cycle, we'll be able to produce something like 1,500 animals from each feedlot. We have been able to do those strategic holding grounds, and we have been able to establish the Isiolo complex and Chemogoch in Baringo as areas we'll be able to put the model feedlot. From the large tracts of holding grounds, the areas have been earmarked where we can be able to put up the infrastructure by the private investor, only 10 acres. And then if somebody is doing pasture and fodder, we can be able to do 50 acres to complement the issue of pasture and fodder production. Now, the reason as to why maybe this has been slow, we don't have a framework on which the investor can be able to use government land and then they lease the land for a period of time, and then after some time, we return it back. We are still working on the framework on which the investor can be able to work on private land, government land. Thank you very much.
A number of issues, which was a follow-up question, and indeed that is quite useful in regards to issues to do with, one of the things we've noted is that for large-scale production in the finishing and fattening enterprise, land seems to be a key constraint. And you have clearly provided a clear framework in terms of public-private partnership, and also availing the 14 strategic holding ground to promote large-scale production. And these are clear initiatives from government. Thank you, that is quite clear. My second panelist is Mary Mburu, who has worked in the meat industry for the last 13 years, with experience largely in processing and value addition in the terminal market, that is export abattoirs. She is also involved in sourcing of livestock to ensure that choice meat gets the right quality to serve both local and our international market. Based on that background and also some of the issues that are coming from this research, Mary, perhaps from your export and local market experience, what are some of the challenges you encounter in sourcing for quality livestock from pastoralists?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, Mr. Wario.
Yeah, very well.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be in this forum today. And the presentation is very much appreciated. I'd want to highlight, and as clearly noted, that the study was done in 2019. And those who have actively been involved in the sector know that a lot has changed. A lot has changed, especially after the COVID pandemic, in terms of a lot of the aspects that were highlighted. So I think the main challenge I'd want to point out, and I want to say that applies to the current situation, is on availability. I'm not certain that market access for those with finished animals is a challenge, because at the moment, I would say things have turned around. There is very little in the way of well-finished animals that's coming to the market. At the moment, we are paying the highest prices we have paid in many, many years. So there definitely was a big shift, possibly last year. A lot of it explained by the drought, I think, that went unnoticed. There was a bit of effect on hotels not taking up and tourism going down. But I think there was a bigger effect on availability of animals. Either possibly the borders became tighter. So what we are saying, the deficit that comes from our neighboring countries was affected. And we have found ourselves in an even bigger deficit, to the extent that us as processors are struggling to just get beef to process. So that's one of the most current challenges. Again, consistency and quality of what is coming across. I know the presentation has defined the finished and the fattened stocks. And a lot of these give us very different qualities. So we are having to deal with finished steers that are very limited in the numbers that are produced. The fattened older animals that give you, on average, good quality, but we're also getting straight from the pastoralists of barely finished animals, because we are looking for everything that's available to just keep going at the moment. So the challenge that this poses, and as we said, the demand is going up, so is the quality expectation of our customers. So whereas today I'll have some good, well-finished steers, and tomorrow what I'll have are possibly fattened animals, I will have complaints. Because obviously the tenderness, the quality will be different. So the biggest concern we have is to be able to streamline the industry in a way that we can be able to consistently produce. If we are saying we are doing finished stock, very high quality, I would say, and the market, I think, is willing to pay, because at the moment, you barely get enough of those. In fact, the prices that we are getting from those producing are extremely high, even though they tell you they don't even have enough. The capacity to produce is very low. So I think those are the main challenges, I would say. The cost is very high at the moment, but availability is getting worse, especially on well-finished animals. Because we interact a lot with a lot of our ranchers and our producers, those who are doing feedlotting, we are well aware about the cost of feeds. And for those who are doing intensive feedlotting, they possibly can tell you how the cost of feed has really escalated. I know currently we are having challenges even trying to import from our neighboring countries grains that can help, and that has not made it any better. I think the other challenge would be for the sector as a whole to be able to have improved breeds, because we have a lot of what is going on for finishing and fattening, giving you very different qualities at the end, because the breeds are not what you'd want, what would give you a better return. So yes, I agree there is a lot to be done. There is still a lot of demand, and I think the customers are getting more more demanding in terms of what ends up on the plate in the hotels. So it's a balance to ensure that we are being able to bring into the market. And I think it's a challenge for those in the industry to be able to see how we can close the gap. In the past, we have tried to export. I think there has always been a feeling that we have a lot of animals in this country, but I can assure you the export, especially for beef, has been, I think, for lack of a better word, non-starter. First, because our prices are extremely high in the international market, and our quality is very low. So you can't have those two combinations. You possibly are not able to export. So I think, very briefly, those are the major challenges I can say that we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And you have naturally transited me to my next panelist, who is a well-renowned professor in this area of nutritionist. Professor Charles Gashuri is a professor of animal nutrition in the Department of Animal Production at the University of Nairobi. He has taught all areas of animal nutrition to both undergraduate and postgraduate students in animal science, veterinary medicine, and range science. Additionally, he has carried out extensive research and published on conventional and non-conventional feed resources for both ruminant and non-ruminant animals. Professor, my question then is, and this has been alluded by both Mary Stanley and also Dr. Boniface. The feed cost constitutes 30 to 35% of feedlot operation, and this seems to be a major bottleneck for many enterprises. What initiatives are being undertaken to address these constraints?
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking the presenter and also thanking KMT for this study. It has opened up and given a lot of information that a lot of farmers and also those who want to start feedlots have been asking from us who are specialized in animal nutrition. Of concern has been feed, and I agree with you that feeding is a big problem. And from the presentation, we have seen that if you're doing the intensive and the semi-intensive production system, feed constitutes almost 35%. And the other big percent is buying in the animals. Now, assuming buying in animals is constant, at the level of production, feed plays the biggest part. Now, to be able to answer that, I want to do a quick 3-minute or 4-minute presentation. And when I was preparing for this, I thought of a lot of questions that have been asked to me by a lot of people who want to start feedlots. I mentioned that feedlots are not very new. They were started some time ago. They didn't work very well. There is this new thinking of feedlots. The people in marketing or selling meat have said they require this good quality meat. So that has brought in a lot of people who are interested. So let me do a very quick, let me see, as a teacher, you always want to have some notes. Let me see, I want to share. And I hope this can be seen by all. Let me see what I can do there. Okay, participants can now see your screen good. Now, some issues that I wanted to consider. Now, will I be able to get this? Yeah. Now, the participants, I just want to take you through something quick to answer a lot of questions that come into mind when you want to start a feedlot. The first thing is, when you do livestock production, the purpose is basically to convert materials not edible to man into high quality feeds. And note the key word here is materials not edible to man. And therefore, ravages or high fiber feeds are the best to convert because we cannot convert this. Now, the best production system, therefore, is converting high fiber feeds to milk and meat. And you would have seen from the presentation that those doing extensive production sometimes make more profit than those who are doing the intensive because they are converting cheap material into milk and meat. The problem is that the production is at times considered low, which is slow growth or low milk production, depending on the quality of the roughage. I think this is the key part when it comes to feeding, that the question is, it is slow to whose rate and low yield compared to what? And once you answer this question, then you are able to decide which way do you go. It is slow due to high demand for food of animal origin. I think the study showed very well that there's an increased demand of food of animal origin necessitated by increased productivity. So feedlotting or finishing is basically accelerating the body weight gain in order to meet this increased demand. So from this slide, we'll see that the cheapest way to produce meat or milk is basically through fiber. But because this is a bit slow, we then go for the higher rates. So this has led to increased inclusion of high energy and high protein concentrates in ruminant diets. Now, this is where, again, the problem starts in the question of feed. Now, this leads to the second consideration, which I wanted to address. Since these ingredients are already edible by human beings, why include them in livestock rations? Since they are already, these are already edible. They are expensive to buy. So you are feeding food, for those who understand, food is for humans, feed is for animals. So you are feeding food to animals, which you can eat yourself. Therefore, you look at two things. In terms of biology, it makes sense to convert proteins of plant origin to those of animal origin because the animal origin ones are of higher quality and therefore more nutritious. So the reason why we feed food to animals is to convert that to something that is of a higher quality compared to what quality was before. For example, if I take maize, maize is low quality. Once you turn it to milk, it becomes a higher quality. And therefore, this leads to improved productivity. Now, the feed conversion ratio, which is key in finishing and feedlotting, is basically how much feed do you need to produce a kilogram of a product. In this case, we are interested in beef, and the figures given have been about 4.5 kilos to 7.5, where 4.5 is really good. That means you are feeding 4.5 kilos of feed to a kilo of beef. Now, of course, the FCR is determined by the breed of the animal. I will not go into breed today, and also the age, because my task is feed. Now, then you have the economics. Most producers who are doing feedlotting, and I'm seeing this from experience, from those who have come to ask me questions, you are trying to do it as an investment to make some profits. So we have the biology is very good, making food from feed, but the economics is to make money out of your enterprise. Therefore, cattle feeding can be profitable, but the level of profit is influenced by the cost of feed and the price of the fed cattle, and also, of course, the initial price of buying the animals that are coming in, and the size of the feedlot. And you can see this has come out from the study that if you have a bigger size, then you make more money. Now, the economic efficiency in the feedlot is determined by the cost of feed and mostly the concentrate portion. And this is why the feed cost for intensive and semi-intensive is very high because of this concentrate portion. For every shilling spent on feed, what do you get in return? Now, the second, since the cost and availability of ingredients fluctuates a lot in Kenya, the economic returns will also fluctuate. So for those who want to go into feedlotting, you need to ask yourself these questions before you go in, that this fluctuation has made some people stop their projects midway because the cost of corn or the cost of protein just jumps up so suddenly that you find the cost that were given earlier by the presentation showed different prices of finishing of the feed per day. So the solution here is easily feed budgeting and buying when the prices are good. The last slide here, again, is the issue of maximum production versus maximum profit. Now, if you look at the requirement for food by human beings, you want enough food for everybody. So we want to go for maximum production. But for the producer, if you are the producer of a feedlot or a finishing lot, then you are looking at also maximum profit. You are not producing food just for the sake of producing for other people. You want also to make money. Now, remember that an animal producing or growing maximally does not translate to maximum profit. So faster growth does not mean more money. A dairy cow producing milk on high quality pasture may yield less, but give the farmer more profit than a cow producing on concentrates. And this can also apply to beef cattle. I can tell you there are some countries now that are going more for pasture produced milk than concentrate produced milk because they can compete in the world markets. So this brings in the issue of market. This has been addressed by Madam Buru. that the market is there. If your market demand the product, good products at a high price, then go for maximum. If e.g. milk prices, some areas you have milk prices are quite low because they are produced on pasture. Vice versa, in peri-urban areas, you can produce milk at higher rates, at a higher cost because the price is higher. I think those were I want to get out of this. I want to stop presenting, and I hope this technology will not let me down. There it is. I'm visible now. Sorry about this screen. I need to stop sharing. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So, Wario, now those were my opening remarks. Now I can try and answer one or two of your questions.
Daktari, allow me to jump to the other panelists. Then, if times allow, I will come back to you for the second question.
Thank you.
My fourth panelist is Omondi Owino, who is the livestock manager at the Mugi Conservancy in Laikipia County. And in this presentation, we've talked about conservancies, we've talked about ranches, and Mary too has mentioned ranches, and therefore ranches plays a very important role in terms of addressing this beef deficit. And my question to Omondi is, how do conservancies support pastoralists to participate in finishing and fattening of their livestock in the Laikipia circuit?
Can you hear me, Mr. Audio?
Sound of the cow, welcome.
Right. Thank you for the presentation. If I did get your question clearly, I was having a bit of a communication problem. But if you allow me, I'll use the case Mugi as the case in this point. What we do, what I know other conservancy also do around here is we collaborate or work together with the local communities, the various tribes around, to help link them up with the markets. And in addition to that, we also finish and fatten their stock. On the finishing side, we run operations whereby we take in the younger bull winners from the pastoralist producers, then put them through consistent feeding, that is on the standing hay or pasture, until they're ready for marketing when we sell them out. And on the fattening side, also during the dry season, we take in the emaciated stock, fatten them, and market them for the pastoralists and charge a small management fee for that. In addition to that, another thing that also we do is on the breed improvement, but that hasn't picked up a lot yet because improving the breeds without working on the pasture, which seems to be the biggest problem, has slowed down the process. So we are also working with pastoralists, right, to improve pastures and rehabilitate the degraded rangelands through supply of grass seeds. We also do breeding, where we try and help out with AI, that is artificial insemination, with the immediate communities around the conservancies.
Thank you very much, Philip. My final panelist is Wilfred Majoli, who is a community member born and raised in Makurian Group Ranches in Laikipia County, and is currently chairman of Oramat Lenoboisho Sacco, which was formed as a result of Borana Ranch Livestock to Market Program. So my question to you, Wilfred, it's quite clear that undertaking finishing and fattening for an individual pastoralist might be an opportunity and also a challenge. What are some of the best ways to organize pastoralists to produce for market and move away from cultural and social attachment to their livestock and effectively participate in finishing and fattening?
If I give an example of what we are doing in Borana is that after a very long drought, that was 2016, we just come up, bring our ideas together and see how we can change the perspective of pastoralism. You know, pastoralism are economic, they react to economy. You sell a cow and you take your child to school and that's all. You sell a cow, you buy food and that's all. But in fact, due to those challenges that drought have been recurring, loss of livestock has been experienced, then we come to find out a solution on how we can rear livestock as a business. Unlike rearing for prestige, you know how the pastoralists are so much attached to livestock. But indeed, we come up with a program called Livestock to Market. That is, we bring animals together to fatten and then put into a market. And we did this through a good relationship with a private conservancy, that is Borana Conservancy. We mobilize our members, we train them. We are still training them. You know, this is a school. As I used to say, livestock pastoralism, livestock keepers are so much attached to livestock. They look livestock as sisters and brothers. There's a cow you cannot lose to a market. But because of the organization that we had to look livestock as a business, that has brought us to rearing livestock or keeping livestock as a business. And that's why we have mobilized our members. They bring in the steers into the market, in the program. We do a fattening, and then we put them on a market. And that has really changed the perspective of pastoralism from seeing the animals as just prestige to seeing them as any other business that we do. So previously we have just undergone several challenges. That is, if we just mobilize members, members are not so much for business. But currently from 2019, 2020 until to 2021, we have seen a number of farmers bringing in steers for fattening and for marketing. And for sure, that has really changed even the connection in terms of looking at the social aspect, the ecological aspect. You can be able to relate how much you invest on land and how much you can get in return of your investment on land, in terms of the return you get from the animals. So that's literally I can mention Dr. Wario on that.
Alfred, I'm afraid that we are time bad. We had planned to run this session until 11:30. I would like to seek your permission to progress with this conversation for an additional 30-minute maximum. If we are able to finish before that, we will really appreciate. And there are a number of questions that have been posted on the Q&A section, but also I can see there are a number of hands that are up. Allow me, and I would like to indulge my panelists, please just take 2 minutes maximum to respond to the final questions so that we can allow the participant to pose 1 or 2 questions. And my question then goes to Professor Charles. The Ministry of Agriculture has recently launched BT cotton production, and this is believed to provide essential ingredient for feed production. Kindly, in 2 minutes, elaborate to the participant how BT cotton will streamline livestock feed production.
Thank you, Wario. The issue of protein supplements in this country is really bad because we rely on importing our protein supplements, and mostly cottonseed cake and sunflower cake from our neighbors. This was due to the collapse of the cotton industry in this country some time back, which is said to have been due to second-hand clothes. There's now more cotton being grown. There's more ginaries coming up, and the old ginaries have woken up. And with the introduction of the BT cotton, which is higher yielder, we do hope that we'll have now more seed produced into the country. So for me, I see hope. there were some issues that came up as to the safety of the BT cotton. I do hope that when we got authority to grow it, that the National Biosafety Committee has taken that into consideration, because we do import a lot of cotton seed from Uganda and from Tanzania, and is one of the major ingredients in the feedlotting. I've been doing rations for people who are doing feedlotting, and I know cotton, if you get cotton seed cake available, consistency is number one, because right now getting cotton in the market is a problem. So I do hope, Wario, that that will solve that problem of protein supplements in the feedlotting industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that elaborate answer. My question then goes to Stanley. Mr. Stanley, you have mentioned that the government has embarked on promoting public-private partnership to unlock issues to do with land constraints. And there is a question from the participant: how will PPP framework work within the finishing and fattening enterprise? Over to you.
Thank you, Wario. Yeah, that's a very good question, and I thank you for the concern. I think the model for having the public-private partnership was to ensure that because the government does not do business, we can be able to bring private investor who can be able to take advantage of the land tracts of holding grounds in our counties, and then they will be able to put up the feedlots, as I mentioned earlier, so that we can have a unit maybe going for 500 animals. And if they are running for a cycle of 3 years, we can be able to produce 1,500 animals per year from each of the strategic holding grounds we are putting the feedlots. But now the concern has been, we have not been able to go into that because, as you realize, even in the report you've been able to give, the issue of access to land is not so serious a concern. The serious concern is the cost of the breeds of the animals you are going to put in the feedlot, and then the cost of feeds. So the issue of land is there. We are trying, as I say, to develop a framework on how the private investor can be able to use government land for a period of time and then be able to return it back, because as you well know, some of the challenges we have in the holding grounds is that they don't have access or free title. So we are still working with the National Land Commission to see how private investor can be able to come in to develop the feedlots. We were able to actually request for expression of interest and also request for proposals. And we were able to get for the first year about 10 of them to develop the feedlot infrastructure, and as the other 10 to develop the pasture and fodder, because as we have mentioned, the feedlots requires a lot of feeds for the animals, and therefore there is need, even as we put up the animals, the infrastructure, to develop also the issue of production of feeds. And we were also intending to do it by pasture for irrigation, and we were working closely with the Ministry of Water as an enabler towards the development of the feedlots. So that's what I could be able to answer briefly in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. My next question is to Mary. Mary, you've talked about the consistency in supply and quality. From a processor point of view, what are the 2 things that has to be done to fix the element of consistency and quality in terms of supply?
Thank you, Mr. Wario. I think one is that our beef production is mainly rain-fed. So when we have drought and the changes in the weather pattern, then we suffer inconsistency. You will have periods when there's a lot of finished animals together, but then that is followed by another season that there's not available, because, as I said, it depends on the pasture and the rains. So we need to look for a model that allows production across the year. And this would come from where we are able to supplement to grow the feeds so that we're able to have consistency in terms of the production and the finishing. So the finishing and the fattening programs, if well designed, can be able to cover the gap that we see based on rain and pasture across the country. Obviously, efficiencies in production would also assist in costs, because if we are more efficient, then it becomes more profitable to the people producing. We are able to also get prices that do not include inefficiencies. Then we are able to sell more. So it benefits the whole value chain. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Omondi, from a rancher's point of view, and based on your interaction with a pastoralist, what are two things that you have to share with the participant here that has to be addressed in order to have pastoralist perspective effectively in finishing and fattening?
It's quite a long list, but I'll try to restrict myself to pick out just two. I would say in attempts to try and commercialize pastoralism, the two main things that stand out is access to veterinary care, that is animal health, and the technical advice that comes with it. It's the biggest thing that is lacking among the pastoralist communities. So if we were to have a more consistent, good quality supply of beef entering the main supply chain, that is one of the places that might need addressing from the Department of Veterinary Services. Or the other one is information. Most pastoralists, due to the nature of where most pastoralists are found, information is lacking, especially where to get the inputs, what market requirements are, and the sort of markets that are available, which they can streamline their production systems towards. Because, for example, the information that is being a presentation by, or the response by Mary from Choice Meats, most pastoralists don't know the sort of quality that is required to get the better prices at the market. So for me, it is the information and the technical knowledge.
Omondi, finally to Alfred, Wilfred, having participated in the Borana Ranch initiative, as a pastoralist, what are some of the gains that you have made from this initiative?
Thank you, Dr. Wario. One of the main one is just selling animals based on weight. That is something very new to pastoralism, because we have been selling our animals based on eyebrow. So I would say that one is giving us a maximum return in terms of livestock value. So that is one. Two, we have been able to put animals together, and that has given us bargain in terms of the volume we produce. We can be able to engage high-class butchers or and other meat dealers.
Thank you very much, Wilfred. Indeed, a clear indication that there is a lot of gain for the pastoralist in terms of integrating them into finishing and fattening. Let me take this opportunity to thank my panelists. Thank you very much for making time. You are still required to be on the panel. There are a number of questions that have been posed by the participant. Kindly take some few minutes to answer those questions. And it will be quite unfair if we let nearly 117 attendees who have sacrificed their time to participate in this session not to post their questions. So because of time, we will allow only 3 attendees to pose their question. And there is James Mungere, whose hands has been up for very long. I'll give him the first opportunity to pose his question. Over to you, James.
Yeah, thank you, Wario. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Very good. My first thing is to start with what Mr. Stanley said about the PPR with for the holding grounds. It has taken a bit too long, and I don't think that may not be the best route to do. And like here we have Naibo, and ever since then, most of this land are invaded and might be politically sensitive to get people out. However, we have land that can land is absentee landlords, which possibly could be converted because they already have titles. Maybe the government should the national government and anybody who is interested can work with the county government for that purpose. Secondly, the other thing is feed. As we stand now, there is no hay enough to last us. I don't think even for the next 2 months, even for us with small few animals. So I think what we need to do is to have dedicated feed producers. And like Mary said, we used to get animals from Somalia. Somalia is becoming stable with time. Ethiopia is the same. If they can sell directly, why would they sell through Kenya? And we know beef in Kenya, like in Anyuki at the moment, you can't believe it. A kilo of beef, bone, it is between 500 and 600 shillings. Then you have to choose whether you have to do that. And the other thing is, what will be the incentive and that we can do for those who might want to invest in high investment production system for beef? And what is the niche market that are we going to supply and serve?
Thank you, James, for those questions. I will invite Mr. Stanley to respond to the PPP one, and then anyone in the panel can then respond to the other question. Mr. Stanley, over to you.
Thank you, Wario and James. I think he has provided the answer, because in the issue of private-public partnership does not necessarily means we only use the holding grounds. If we have any land that any investor is challenged and they want to use that land, I think we can always develop mechanism of how to access that land. But I think the concern is still the issue that was mentioned in the report, that land acquisition or access is not a big concern. But the land can also be used for the development, especially as he has mentioned, on the issue of pasture and fodder production, so that we can be able to have adequate pasture, we have adequate hay that can be able to stand the times, especially when we are going to a dry spell like the one we are in now. We can be able to talk of having adequate pasture, hay, especially for the feeds, for the livestock, not necessarily feedlot. So I think the window is open. We can always get as many land availability to whoever private investor is willing to take up the feedlots. Thank you.
Wario, could I respond to the issue of feeds?
Sure.
When I was presenting, I put it very clearly that we need to start thinking about fodder and forage as a method of production. The reason being, as I said earlier, the forage is still the cheapest way to produce meat and milk. So as we look at concentrates and fattening and fast growing, there is real need to look at the base of forage and improve quality and productivity of fodder to support this finishing and also the fattening business. So I wanted to reemphasize that as we look at maize, we look at cotton, we look at sunflower to fatten, let us not forget that base of fodder would make it cheaper to fatten and finish animals, and also making sure that the beef is affordable. We may say there is a need for quality beef, but remember the majority of Kenyans are still at the level where they are looking at just some meat to eat. So we must also consider that level. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I don't see, let me just check my attendees. I don't see any hand that is up, and therefore it means most of the questions perhaps but participant had have been answered. Let me see, I see. Okay, I see one more hand that is up. That is Faith Cherono Faith, if you can keep your question to 1 or 2, we will really appreciate. Over to you, Faith.
Hello.
Yeah, we
You're
can hear
getting
you
me?
now. Yeah.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Faith from the County Government of Kajiado, Livestock Production Department in particular. I just want to thank the organizers of this webinar for shedding some light on fattening and finishing. At least I've known the difference between the two today. And there's a lot of, my concern is this, there's a lot of interest coming up on feedlots, and we need a guideline. Everyone has his own version for success, but I think as the department mandated with the livestock production nationally and also at the county, it is us to give a guideline. What is it that is supposed to be done? Just the way we've seen with we have had several guidelines on zero grazing, dairy, but I think it is high time now we have a national guideline on feedlots to guide everyone who is interested in taking part in feedlots, because I'm afraid most farmers have been exploited. Yeah, but we now need something to guide us and nationally on feedlots, because it's becoming something interesting, and we have more forums on the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith, for that comment and also recommendation that we need something like a guideline or a manual on finishing and fattening. Allow me to pick one question from the Q&A section, and anyone either from the research team or the panelists can answer this. And the question is from Andrew. I wonder if you have any observations on male animals derived from dairy breeds. For example, market perspective on dairy breeds derived from beef, or gross margin and profitability under the different finishing systems, or dairy derived stocks, male and unwanted heifers. Or is this as yet too small for separate study? I will ask my colleague, Dr. Boniface, to answer this, because there's currently one of the feedlots we are supporting, which is in the dairy space. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, Wario, and thank you to the person who raised the question. Yes, it is true. We have seen a number of, and actually a big proportion of our fattened meat, beef, comes from some of the cows from the dairy industry. And right now, I think we're supporting similar initiatives, or rather trying to pilot similar initiative with a fattening enterprise in Laikipia. And what they're doing is they would get the steers from the dairy farms. And I know there's also similar enterprises in Mwingi and Machakos. And they're emerging very strongly, where they will go to Githunguri, they will go to different dairy breeding areas and buy the steers and go after a year or so, they release them to the market. Yes, it's a market that is coming. We haven't done a study on them as yet. As of now, we're trying to look at how do we bridge this gap? And I would say, yes, that is one area also of opportunity for investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daktari. Last opportunity to Martin or Yindo before we move to the next session.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Martin.
Good afternoon here. My name's Martin Luther Oindo, County Director of Livestock Production, Taita Taveta County. I want to take this opportunity, first of all, for the organizers of this meeting. It has been very instrumental, and I've been keen in listening to the various presentations that we've gotten today. Mine is not a question, but mine is just to say that in Taita Taveta County, We have various ranches, cooperative group ranches, and also private company ranches and directed agricultural ranches, which are owned by the communities. They have quite diverse land for establishing feedlots. And one of the opportunities available is that some of the ranches have got resources for enhancing meat production or meat value chain in the county. Given that Taita Taveta is strategically located in terms of access to infrastructures and road network to the various markets. One thing that we lack and we need to enhance as far as marketing is the various market outlets that we have in the county, in the country. And this information will actually direct our ranchers on what type of product or what type of breed standards or quality meat that is required in the market. That is one. And number two, ranchers have developed a lot of interest in establishing feedlots. And this guidance or information is actually essential for our ranchers. And maybe as time goes by, we need to organize a meeting and engage our ranchers as stakeholders on the direction to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, allow me just to give like 3 points. There are a number of things that have come out of this conversation, which could be 10 or 20, and we cannot list all of them. So sticking to the rule of 3, so that we get out of this room with a clear message. One is that we've agreed that to drive large-scale finishing and fattening, land remains a major constraint, and therefore addressing this constraint through PPP is very essential in unlocking large-scale investment for both fodder production and also for finishing and fattening enterprise. Very critical. And this has been opened up by the Ministry of Agriculture from Mr. Stanley. It's quite clear that that opportunity has been provided. The other thing is that consistency of supply and poor quality remains a key constraint to both local and export market. As a country, we need to find mechanism to address this challenge. Kenya is blessed with exotic breed that has been exploited by other countries, and hence we need to invest in research at the same level with countries that have taken advantage of this exotic breed. The third point is that as a country, our competitiveness will be hindered by cost of feed, despite having other necessary ingredients, such as good infrastructure, that is seaport, airport, exotic breed, well-established financial institutions, and traditional animal husbandry practices. Therefore, there's need to address the element of cost of feed for us to remain competitive. Lastly, we need to develop mechanism to effectively integrate pastoralists to commercial pastoralism. This should be enhanced through effective coordination with ranches, conservancies, and we need to rethink government and donor investment in the northern corridor. At this point, allow me to invite my colleague Miriam Mule to give a vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wario, for giving me the opportunity to give a vote of thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Christopher Wanga and the entire State Department of Livestock for their support to KMT and also to the efforts towards modernization of the livestock sector. We know that they are committed to ensuring that the sector is modernized and that we are at a point that the sector is able to move from the point it is and be able to be competitive regionally. I'd also like to appreciate the panelists. We have Professor Gashuri, Dr. Mondi, Stanley Humaya, Mary Mboro, and Wilfred Mijwebi. We thank you for availing yourselves to take part in these discussions and also for being able to respond to some of the questions that have come up. We know that we'll continue engaging more with the participants even in the course of time. I'd like to also appreciate the consultants who were able to help us undertake this study. Cambridge consultants led by Dr. Mohamed Yusuf and Guten Biyu. Thank you for the work that you put in for us to be able to have these results. And we know that this is the start of a discussion that will be able to enrich the discussions further. Last but not least, I'd like to thank you participants sincerely for joining us today. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints, we've not been able to go through all the questions, and we have only scratched the surface, but we hope that this is the beginning of further conversations, and the findings from this study will be instrumental in driving uptake of finishing and fattening practices, and consequently also leads to the modernization of the livestock sector for the greater good of the country. We'll be sending the PowerPoint presentations to the various emails of the participants, and also for the questions that have not been responded to as yet, we'll be doing that on the chat. And also, if you have any further questions, any engagement, feel free to get in touch with us through the email that will be provided. There'll be an email that will, the email that will send the PowerPoint presentations. Please feel free to use that to send us any more correspondence that you have. Thank you all, and God bless you.